Hello. I'm Celeste, and this is Week by Week. On today's episode, I start off with a conversation with my husband where we dive into the topic of community. And later on, our guest is the wonderful Colleen Frost. Let's do this.
Oh, well, hello. Fancy meeting you here.
What are you doing in my house where you live?
I'm living in the house where you live. What are you doing?
In the house where I live. This sucks.
What is this weird Alice in Wonderland bit that we're doing?
So, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about something that's been floating around in my mind since my interview with this week's guest, and that's the topic of community.
Yes, and it is a topic that you and I are very deeply versed in because we not only have been a part of many different, especially creative communities, but it's something that I think appeals to both of us as a concept, and it's something that we seek out and that we try to build.
I absolutely agree with that. In my conversation with this week's guest, we talked a lot about remembering to reach out to your community and the support system that's around you. And it's really gotten me thinking. And as I've kind of dug into that idea in my own life, I've actually surprised myself a little bit because I have this incredible community around me. And so it actually snuck up on me this week how lonely I'm feeling. You can really have blind spots and ignore those places where you're like, oh, wait, I haven't been reaching out as much, or I haven't been asking for help when I need it. And it's just been a really, really good reminder for me that I need a little bit more of that in my life right now.
Yeah, and I think another reminder, especially in this crazy time, to take what you were just saying one step further is that community is something that you need to cultivate and you need to stay proactive about. It can't just be a passive thing. Mm-hmm. Even in quote unquote normal times, when you and I had some active communities that had certain places or activities that we always knew people from our community would be in this place, multiple days a week or nights a week.
To paint the picture, you and I met doing comedy. And so knowing that there is a comedy club where any given combination of people from our community will be hanging out on any given night. And if you go there, you're going to run into people or have the opportunity to have conversations with people who are there for common interest. And it's kind of like a quick way to get connection.
Absolutely. And then even over and above that place, it's all the circles of friends that go out from that. So I think a lot about, or I have thought a lot about, the weekend before everything shut down. You were pregnant, and we went to a birthday party that had a huge number of mostly more from my circle, but many of them that you were friends with. And it was probably 30, 40 people that I had known for a long time. And for a long time, I was like, thank goodness we all got to see each other so close to this time. But yeah, you do take it for granted is kind of the point that I guess I'm getting to, and that you and I both have started to lean into recently. We want to be more proactive. We want to reach out to our community and make more kind of visits and hangouts and, even needing to do whatever we need to do to stay safe in the doing of it, that we want to be reconnected to our community in a more active way.
Well, I think something else that came up for me this week inside of that reaching out idea is that how to lean in and celebrate some of the different personalities and different people inside of your community when you are asking for help or thinking about needing support or leaning on people. Specifically, this week, I brought something to you and it was great. You supported me, you heard me, but you were passing through, you needed to go to your next meeting. I didn't really get what I was looking for emotionally in that moment. And I reached out to a couple different people and I just ended up being a little bit of an emotional miss every single time. And what I was looking for ultimately was another mom to just be oh, I know, I get it. And it struck me that in this time where we've been so isolated physically from people, you start to put a lot of needs that you would in another time, in another situation, be able to reach out to other people about on one person. And it's been a nice reminder to go I think it's like an Esther Perel thing too. You got to know I love Esther Perel. But where she's like, you know, we have these romantic relationships and then we start to expect them to be every relationship. And so it was just a good reminder, lean into the different people in your community, but also it's okay to realize you need something else when you do reach out to somebody, and don't let that deter you from reaching out to the next person. Because I think sometimes when you do reach out to someone and then you have an emotional miss, it feels like nobody gets it, or like I'm so sad, or I'm so lonely. And it felt so cathartic when I finally had this conversation with another mom to hear her go, oh, I know, I get it. And just to hold space for it and empathize and say like, tell me more, or like, oh wait, what happened? And just like to be able to like unload it a little bit. So that's just something I've been thinking about in this time. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I would just circle back. My thought hearing you go through all that is that it just can't be passive, that we need to be active in our community. And I think that especially your mom role has, you know, so many different layers to it that I don't have going on for me. But I think as parents, I do think I could universally say that it is important for us to ask friends and people in our community for a little bit of time, a little bit of support, a little bit of focus, or just to share with them, to reach out to them, to be proactive to them. And I think that cultivating a community is not just one direction or just an assumption. It's active.
There's another component to what you're saying that hit me during that, which is how you are for the people coming to you. Something I've been thinking about so much over this last stretch of time is like, how do you hold space for somebody? How do you receive? And like, I think especially as a mom, I'm spending a lot of time actively trying to hold space for my son and his experience, or hold space for the people around me. And I think that it's both sides of things, where it's how do you do that in a way that feels authentic and comfortable to you and doesn't completely deplete you? And then how do you show up to other people and ask them to hold space for you in a way that feels like you are getting fulfilled in that? And it's so hard. It's so hard to truly see somebody, and it's so hard to let yourself be seen. And those are like, I think that's like where the power of like the world lies.
I do think that the way to unlock that power is through vulnerability and reaching out and asking and sharing. That's how you unlock it.
I couldn't agree more. In like one sentence, what is one way that you let yourself be seen, and what is one way that you actively work to hold space or see someone?
Oh, wow. I mean, lots of different ways that I try to hold space for others, you know, at work, definitely here at home. That's something that I strive to do. For myself, I think that's been a journey for me to unlock that and to find ways and times and places and people to be seen. I try to share one layer deeper than just the general day-to-day patter or conversation. Like just sharing one layer deeper, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, you know, what's going on for you, and then asking other people one layer deeper about what's going on for them. It's not just the weather. It's not just what are you watching on the old streameroo. It's how are you feeling? How are you doing with this? How is this person in your life doing that I know you haven't been able to see because they live across the country or whatever? Going that one layer deeper, I think, is a technique that I think has worked.
That's wonderful. The last note that I want to say just to close this out, I think, is like being really, really honest. I felt really lonely this week. And it was like, it really hit me, and it hit me in a couple different ways and at a couple different times. But it felt sad. And I am so thankful that I was able to ground by reaching out. But I know that everybody goes through times where they feel lonely, and it's easy to forget that you have people, or maybe sometimes the people in your life can't be there in the way that you want them to be there. So I guess it's like, I wanted to just hold space for anybody out there who feels lonely, and then also know that there are people there who get it, and to reach out.
Hear, hear.
Our guest today is Colleen Frost. Colleen was born and raised in Moorhead, Minnesota. She graduated from St. Luke's Hospital School of Nursing. She's been a NICU nurse for over 30 years and is currently the supervisor in the neonatal intensive care unit at Essentia Health Hospital in Fargo, North Dakota. She's the mother of 4 uniquely wonderful grown kids, 3 sons and a daughter, and she currently resides just a few blocks from her childhood home in Moorhead. She feels so fortunate to have been asked to try NICU nursing all those years ago and can't imagine caring for any other than these tiny, fragile patients and their families. Colleen is a really special person. Our conversation was a real roller coaster for me. I teared up, I got chills. I was so taken by her insight and her emotional awareness, and I found our conversation to be really touching. So, here we go. If you wouldn't mind just starting off with like what your job is and how you got into that.
I am the NICU supervisor at Essentia Health Hospital in Fargo. We are a 14-bed NICU, all individual rooms. I have been doing NICU nursing for over 30 years now. I got into it, actually, I just kind of fell into it, and I think I got very lucky because I was working on a different unit that had the same director as the NICU in that previous hospital, and they had a couple openings come up in the NICU, and she said, hey, how would you feel about trying out the NICU? And I said, yeah, sure, fine. And I'm so glad I did because it's been wonderful. I can't imagine doing anything else now. And so I just kind of fell into it.
That's fantastic. What is it about it that you like about it?
I love the babies. I love the families. I used to, I still occasionally say, although I'm, pretty much past my childbearing years, but once I was done having all my own children, I was like, I have the perfect job because I can go to work, take care of babies, snuggle babies, and not have to think, oh, I want to have another one of my own. So it's perfect, but it's incredibly rewarding. There's a very technical side to it. It can be very high intensity, but also there's just the sweet, very happy side of it of, seeing babies grow and thrive and families meeting milestones and eventually taking their babies home. And it's just incredibly rewarding.
That sounds incredibly rewarding. I have chills just kind of hearing you talk about it. That's wonderful. If somebody was in a position where they might have their baby go to the NICU, is there anything off the top of your head that you can think of that is good to be aware of or anything? I'm sure, it's all kind of individual in terms of the specifics, but any kind of general advice you could give to someone who might be in that position?
I would say your NICU journey is your own. And everybody's NICU journey is going to be different. While it's good, I think, to have support, I would say try not to compare your journey to others because, again, everybody's is different. I would say it's going to be difficult. And I think sometimes people hear, oh, your baby just had this or just was in the NICU for 3 days or whatever. And there are no justs. That's your baby. So 3 days can seem like an eternity. I mean, you thought you were going to be having your baby in your room the whole time you were in the hospital and take it home on day 2 or whatever. And that's not what's happening. So try to remember that it's your own journey. You are welcome to be a part of all of your baby's care. And we hope that we convey that message to you. And sometimes it's scary, but try to allow yourself to do that, to become a part of your baby's care. Not only the doing of it, but the planning of it. And enjoy the small victories, especially for a baby that's maybe there longer or is quite sick. Try to take one day at a time. We really try to make the family part of the team. And I would say if you're starting to feel that you're not, say something.
When you're planning or you're kind of making that structure, What's that process like? Do you sit down every day, or how do you check in? Like, what kind of is the flow of that experience?
Well, we do rounds every day, usually in the morning. And if the family is in the room with the baby when we're doing rounds, we encourage them to be part of that. We also let them know at the beginning that this is our generally what we do day to day, and we encourage you to be there if you're able to. So they're very much part of the conversation. When we do rounds, we generally talk about where we're at, maybe what's happened in the last 24 hours or so, or longer if it's been longer since the parents could be part of it. And then what's the plan going forward? Are there certain challenges that we're trying to figure out what's the best way? Especially when we get to talk about feedings and things like that, we very much want the parents part of that process. If mom is planning to breastfeed, we want that to be part of the process. So it's just kind of a discussion in the room every day. Once a week, we have what we call grand rounds, and that's just where every department that's involved in the baby's care is part of the rounding process. And so we get into social aspects and occupational therapy and respiratory therapy, and the case manager, who is our nurse that handles the social side of things, connecting them with services, things like that. So it's a much bigger group once a week. But that being said, outside of rounds, we are happy to come in as nursing or the providers, doctors, nurse practitioners. Anytime the parents have questions and want to talk it over, we want them to know that we're available.
There's probably a need for support for the parents going through that, because I can only imagine it's a pretty emotionally heavy time.
Yes.
What kind of things do you suggest for somebody who's going through that?
First, probably the biggest thing is to talk to the staff, talk to nursing, talk to the providers, and make sure you understand. And then outside of that, seek out the resources that you know you have. Your family, your friends. Do you know others that have been in the same situation? There are groups online. I would just caution a little bit that groups can be very supportive, but sometimes also there can be some negativity that comes out of that. So if you're starting to feel uncomfortable, I would be careful with that. We also have the case manager, as I said, that can help maybe connect you with some outside help if you think that you need something a little bit more, like maybe you need somebody to talk to that's more of a professional. We can help connect you with that, because again, the NICU stay is very stressful, and sometimes you just need somebody to talk to.
Yeah, absolutely.
We also have a specialist called a child life specialist, and they wear many, many hats in our hospital, and we're so fortunate to have them. But they specialize in supporting families. They specialize in supporting maybe siblings of the baby that's in the NICU, and different approaches and different activities that can be done to help support the siblings, because they're part of the family unit, so they're part of it too. And they also have some real specialty in the area of bereavement. And so if it happens to be a situation like that, they're just an invaluable resource for us.
That's amazing. For you going through that experience, how do you balance kind of the emotion of that and the weight and the stress? I can imagine it'd be hard to kind of turn that off when you go home. And there's some emotional stuff that goes along with that. If you could speak to that, I'm very curious.
I've been doing this for a very long time. So as the years go by, you become a little bit more adept at being able to separate and find ways of coping that work for you. That being said, there are times that are hard not to carry home with you. Mm-hmm. You know, a particularly sad situation is hard to put out of your mind, even though you've gone home. I would say nurses are very supportive of each other. And really, the whole care team, not just nurses, our providers and our ancillary departments, we're all very much a team. That's one of the things we're very proud of in our unit, and I think we're very good at supporting each other. As a leader on my unit, myself and my manager and my director all really try to help our team as best we can. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you just got to cry it out, which that happens too.
Yeah.
A common response I get when I tell people I work in the NICU is, oh, that must be so hard. Well, yeah, there are things that are hard about it. It's also incredibly rewarding. So it tends to kind of balance out also, because there's just so many happy times.
Oh my gosh, I bet. I was so struck by some of the things you said early on about like being in the moment, those tiny victories, and just it's such a great reminder for just life in general of just like take it day by day and don't forget to celebrate the little wins that sometimes we just are too busy to, acknowledge or really enjoy. Do you have advice for somebody if their friend was in the NICU or their child was in the NICU of good ways to talk to them or anything that you can offer about addressing or engaging in conversation with someone who might be going through that?
I would say general support, just being there, open-ended type of questions. Something like, tell me about how Jack is doing. Tell me about how Jack's day was today. And not maybe trying to get into the technical stuff, that kind of thing, just more focusing on that this is still a baby. Yeah. This is still this family's baby, despite maybe all the machines and tubes and IVs and whatever that they're hooked up to. It's still your baby. Tell me about who he looks like. Tell me about what he does that makes you happy. What happens when you get to touch him? If you haven't been able to hold yet, when do you think you might be able to? And maybe just kind of, stay away from the advice side of things, because truly very few people have had experience with NICU. So most people really don't know all that much about it. So just trying to be supportive and kind of just let the family talk about what they want to talk about.
I'm wondering what being a NICU nurse has taught you about motherhood or has made you think about or I guess honestly on the other side too, what your experience as a mother, knowing that you're a mom of 4, how has the kind of interplay been between NICU nurse and mother?
I feel very fortunate in the birth experiences that I had. I mean, there were some minor challenges, but, I took my babies home with me when I went home. So especially when I was younger and my kids were younger, I would reflect on that and feel fortunate. But I would say the NICU has taught me so much. Certainly taught me about empathy, certainly taught me about ways to support people through struggle. I certainly had missteps along the way, certainly had times that I probably said the absolutely wrong thing. I guess the important thing is that we learn from those moments when that happens. There's a certain way that you can connect with moms if you're a mother yourself. And not taking anything away from some of our nurses that aren't mothers, because they're wonderful also. But I think you just have a special connection when you're a mother yourself.
In terms of your journey in discovering what to maybe say or not say, or how to kind of handle some of these situations, do you have any specific stories or any specific things that you discovered through that process that you could share with me?
One thing that I say when people ask me, oh, you work in the NICU, it must be so hard. And as I said before, it's very rewarding. But even the very difficult situations that I have been a part of, I have learned so much, and they have been beautiful moments. And I can think of a couple of different situations where I was caring for the family of a baby that was going to die. And it wasn't a surprise. Like, we knew that it was going to happen, and we gave them their space and we gave them their time. And the beauty of the families and the beauty of their interactions between each other and with their baby in those times are some of it. Just kind of makes me want to cry.
You're making me tear up.
There are some of the best memories that I have in all my years of being a NICU nurse, because of course it was incredibly sad. but just such beautiful, beautiful moments. And they can be. And I hope that we can help facilitate them to be beautiful moments for those families, but certainly for the staff too.
Yeah, my gosh. Along with all of the technical stuff and the emotional intelligence that's part of your job, there's also this part of your job that's to give space and help kind of facilitate the emotional space that someone needs to go through that experience. And that is incredibly powerful. And again, I think a testament to a certain type of person who can do that for somebody and know how to be involved, but also to allow them to have that experience and be touched by it. Is there anything inside of the NICU experience that you feel like is under talked about or not really known or maybe misunderstood?
It probably happens a little more often than people think. Also, there's just a wide spectrum of NICU experiences and reasons for babies to be in the NICU and length of stay that maybe a lot of people don't know about. And a lot of the NICU stays, while not discounting that it's a very stressful experience for the families, are, maybe a few days. Baby just needed a minimal amount of care, but just wasn't quite ready to go home. Mm-hmm. So there are stays like that too. In our unit now, the parents can stay 24/7. They can sleep in the room with their baby, and we really encourage that. So even the very, very sick babies, parents could be right there in the room with them as much as they want to be, which I think maybe is another thing that people don't generally understand. They maybe think, you can't touch, you have to look at them through the plastic box and whatever. And that's really not necessarily the case anymore.
Is that something that changed with science as we had better understandings of what was safe?
Yes. A couple of things changed. Well, we have been in our new NICU for 2 years now, and we have all individual patient rooms. And we can have twins in the same room, but we don't have different families in the same room. Prior to 2 years ago, we had kind of the old-fashioned unit where everybody was just in one big room, and you were separated by curtains at best. So that experience changed, and the whole mindset of how to create a NICU space changed based on research. And so, noise and privacy and, all the things that you don't get much of when everybody's in one great big room. And we are so proud of our new NICU, and we're so happy for our families in this space now. So that's one of the things that changed, but also so much research into the importance of the family presence, the importance of family touch, the importance of babies hearing their family's voice, because they've been hearing it for how many months, how many weeks now through the womb. So how important those things are to the growth and development of a baby. And that's come with time.
Is there a reason a baby typically ends up in the NICU, or is it kind of all over the map? Is it typically prematurity, or is it, just a whole bunch of variables?
It is all over the map. There obviously are premature babies and some extremely premature babies who have a very long road ahead when they're born that early. But we also have many, many term newborns that need to be in the NICU for one reason or the other. It could be that they're jaundiced. Some jaundice can be handled, when baby's with mom in the normal newborn area, if they just need light therapy, which we call phototherapy. But if they need something beyond that, if they need IVs, then they need to come to the NICU. So that's something that is usually term babies that would need to come for that. Sometimes a baby is born and has possibility of infection. So then they need to come to the NICU because they need IV fluids and they need antibiotics. Lots and lots of babies born that just need some respiratory support. That's pretty common. Sometimes it's just a day or 2 or 3 of help with their breathing. Sometimes it's longer than that. But, all over the spectrum.
For my son, He came a little early, but there was a thought he might have to come even a little more early than that. And so my OBGYN prepped me that he might have to go to the NICU for a little bit. But also then he was having a little bit of a blood sugar issue after he was born. So he had to be checked, and if that didn't resolve, we would have had to go. Mm-hmm. And hearing that felt like, oh my gosh, like, what's going on? And it's nice to kind of understand that there are a lot of like pretty typical reasons, because I think you tend to hear about those situations when they're extremes and not as much like a day or two kind of a thing, which it's nice to have an understanding of kind of the various reasons that somebody might end up there.
Yes. And blood sugars would be another reason for babies to need to come to the NICU. Sometimes, despite all our best efforts to keep baby with mom and try to manage baby there, their blood sugar is just unstable enough that they have to come to the NICU. So that's another very common reason for NICU stays.
You've talked about some of the moments of joy and some of the rewarding feelings of it, but any moments or specifics you could share about something that's been really wonderful about this job or the experience?
There certainly are some families that, for many different reasons, have really touched my heart. Part of it, watching them interact with their baby. Part of them that have been through some really struggles. And they're just so resilient, and some people are just so incredibly positive in some very difficult situations. And it's just almost inspiring at times, because I think, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could behave the way you're behaving if I was in the same situation. And you see them years later out and about or whatever. It's a pretty small town, so you run into people sometimes, and you see these children that have grown up to be big and strong and smart and funny and creative. And that, to me, is a testament to their families. And I mean, we're happy to be a part of, facilitating the beginning of that. But that's one of the most rewarding things is when, we get so many pictures at Christmas time that people send us of babies that we've taken care of. And it's incredibly rewarding to see that.
Oh, I bet. That's so touching. Oh my gosh. Do you mind talking a little bit about what your journey personally toward motherhood was like, and when did you decide, or how did you know you wanted to be a mom, and just, again, the experience of having 4 children and what that's been like?
I always knew that I wanted to be a mom someday. And then my former husband and I actually moved to Japan quite soon after we got married, and ended up having our oldest 2 children in Japan, which was a whole nother experience. Delivering at that time in military hospitals was an interesting experience. So we started our family there, and then we moved back to the States, and then we had our last 2 children stateside, which was, again, a totally different experience than we had had previously.
What was the biggest difference, or what were some of the differences, if you don't mind?
I don't know that this is the case anymore, so I just want to say that first. But delivering in military hospital, especially maybe overseas, there's not a lot of frills. It's very utilitarian. Like you get in there, they do their job, you have your baby, you go home. Like there's no, like now everything is trying to make it almost like a spa-like experience, and soft colors and all the amenities and things like that, which is wonderful. But yeah, it wasn't that at all. And then coming back to the States, this was like in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. So it was just starting to become a little bit more of a focus to try to make birthing centers more family friendly, and a kind of a softer environment, and a little bit more towards catering to your needs and maybe trying to keep you happy so that you don't go to the other place that's down the road. So that would be the biggest differences, I think. And when I delivered in the military hospitals, or it was the same hospital in Japan, but everybody was military. There were no civilians at all. So everybody was in uniform, and We ended up with 4 kids. Did I know? Did I want to have 4 kids? No. And actually, I kind of tease my kids because really the only kid that was planned was the very first one. The other 3 just kind of happened, as they say. So, yeah.
Well, you have good kids, so
Yeah.
it all worked out.
Yeah, they're pretty awesome.
And in terms of growing up, what was your relationship to being a mother? Like, did you enjoy the process? Were there things that surprised you about that? Were there things that were challenges you didn't expect?
I think motherhood is probably my greatest joy in my life. My kids certainly are my greatest joys. And, they're always your kids, no matter how old they get, no matter how big they are. You're always mom. I did enjoy it. Was it crazy? For sure. I had 4 kids in less than 6 years. So it was a little crazy at times. I did try to work full time for a while when my kids were little. I finally had to say, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to have a nervous breakdown because it's just too much to have. And to try to devote the energy to your kids that they need when they're little and work a full-time job and keep up a house and all that kind of stuff. I reached a point where I had to say, no, I can't. And of course we talked it over and I dropped down to part-time, which it was just like a huge sigh of relief. Many, many moments of joy and wonderful memories. And I've got tubs of pictures that who knows if they'll ever get into albums, and many, many good memories, and just really wonderful extended family that wanted to be part of our kids' lives and very much were as they were growing up. So there definitely was a village, which was wonderful. Challenging times for sure. I think that's just kind of part of the job. So definitely times of what did I do wrong? Why is my child going through this, whatever it happens to be? Mm-hmm. And I think every mom, every parent goes through those things. So definitely ups and downs, good times, bad times. But in the end, right now, my kids are in their 20s and 30s, and they are 4 of the people that I prefer to be around most. So I guess that's a pretty good thing to be able to say.
Kindness is the word that comes to mind when I think of your family and think of your children. And I think that is like just the most important trait to encourage in children, and we need more of it. And I just think you did such a great job of that.
Well, first of all, thank you. And I appreciate that. And it really warms my heart to hear you say that. I mean, I certainly put conscious thought into that. I certainly tried to teach my children how to be kind. I mean, I definitely tried to teach them ways of interacting with other people. I'm thankful they turned out to be very kind people. And also, I don't think I can completely take credit for that. Because, as I said, like grandparents, extended family, aunts and uncles, they really had a world of people around them that also felt it was important to teach them those things. And so, like thinking of my mom in particular, I had a wonderful mother. And my mother passed now 6 years ago, much too early. But when I think back, I think I've done a lot more reflecting, certainly since she passed. But as my kids have gotten older, about what a significant influence she was in my life and my children's lives. A very kind soul and somebody who really thought it was important to teach kids those things too. So there were other people in their lives that certainly were a part of that. And, even wonderful teachers and mentors along the way too. So
something I will reflect on after this conversation is multiple times you've referenced community and the importance of having those people around you. And I just think that's such a good takeaway, especially in this time where it feels like we've been so separated. There's a community around you, or can be a community around you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think it's important as parents too to have that if you can, because, I mean, parenting is exhausting. And sometimes you're maybe just on your best game, and that's okay. It's going to happen. And if you have other people that you can trust, and then you can count on to help you with that task, I really think that's important, to not ever think that you have to go it alone, or we should be able to do this all ourselves, because, I mean, that's kind of nonsense, I think, really.
Absolutely. I love that so much. And it's so easy to choose the path of, I'm just going to be hard on myself, and why can't I figure this out? So just remembering to look out, reach out, and share that, I think, is such an incredible point. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to speak to, or that comes to mind?
Mothering is such a network, or motherhood is such a network. And it's just so important how we support each other, how we learn from each other, how we pick each other up in times we need to be picked up, and just how influential that network is for ourselves, for each other, and for our children. It's a pretty cool thing.
It's been so wonderful to talk to you. I feel like I've constantly had goosebumps, or like been tearing up this entire time. So thank you so much for all of that.
Thank you so much for the invite.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Week by Week. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Week by Week Podcast, and visit our blog at weekbyweekpodcast.com. Check out the show notes for more information about our guests and additional resources I used and referenced during this episode. This podcast was produced during the COVID-19 pandemic and recorded remotely. Our show today was produced by me, Celeste Busa, and Dave Hill, and edited by Douglas Sarine and Colleen Beasley. Week by Week is a Gumption Pictures production.